We've learned the basic syntax of CSS. Now, let's build on that knowledge and style our project. As we move forward, we'll learn about lots of selectors, properties, and values. To start out, we'll style the basic elements of our site. If you were following along with our previous example, let's delete the style element that we created because it was only for the purposes of the example. We won't need that code in our actual project. Next, let's create a style sheet. So we'll create a new file by right-clicking on the file tree, and we'll call it main.css. But you can call yours whatever you'd like, as long as it has the .css file extension and you remember what you called it. Now, once I create the file, you'll notice that it automatically opens it up for me. But first, we need to move this into our CSS directory, so I'm going to click and drag it into CSS. There we go. And before we get started coding over here in main.css, we want to make sure that we add this to our HTML file. So this is going to be very similar to our previous line of CSS. I'm going to copy that and paste it below. So I've copied the normalize.css line here, and I've pasted it below. And I need to change the file name here to main.css. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. Because of the cascading nature of CSS, it's important that our CSS, or main.css, comes after normalize.css. We don't want normalize to overwrite any of our CSS. And conversely, we want to make sure that normalize comes first and sets up a solid foundation for our custom CSS. In fact, we might be overriding some rules in normalize.css. So we want main to come after normalize. That's very important. Now, let's jump into our CSS document, which I've called main.css, and let's try a really dramatic and obvious change, just to make sure that our CSS is included properly. I'm going to select the body element, which is basically the entire page, and I'm going to change the background color to orange. So I'll type background color and change it to orange. If we save the file and refresh our preview, you can see that the background for the entire page has been changed to orange. So we know that main.css has indeed been included properly into our HTML file. If for some reason your background color doesn't change to orange, make sure to first check the syntax here, and then also check to make sure that main.css comes after normalize and that the path is correct. It needs to be the CSS folder and then main.css. And your main.css file needs to be inside the CSS folder. It's very important as well. Now, I don't want my body background color to be orange, so I've highlighted everything by hitting Command A on a Mac or Control A if you're on Windows, and I'll delete everything in the file. Now, I want to remove the underline that's on our links. I want to have links that don't have an underline, so I'm going to select all of the anchor elements on our page, and I'm going to type the property text decoration and set it to none. And if I save that, go back to the browser and refresh, you'll see that first our background color has once again defaulted to white, and there are no longer any underlines on our links. Great. Now let's start organizing our layout a little bit. We need to add some markup in order to wrap the main part of our content and select it appropriately. To do that, we're first going to switch back over to our HTML and create an element called a div, which doesn't have any semantic meaning at all. Rather, it's a way for us to encapsulate or divide a group of elements. Let's open our div right after our header element. So we'll go here. In between our header and section, we'll type div. And then we're going to close this just between our footer and body here. And you'll notice that Workspaces has actually highlighted body and HTML in red. That's because it's saying somewhere in here there's a tag that is not closed. And in our case, that's the div. And if we type that in, you'll see that it automatically closes for us. Now we have a lot of code that needs to be indented by one tab. So starting at the footer down here at the bottom, going all the way up to my section here, just before this div, I'm going to select everything. And to do that, I just hold down Shift and click right here. Then again, to indent on a Mac, I'm going to hit Command and then closing square bracket. And on Windows, you hit Control and square bracket. And that will indent everything by 1. So now it's indented by 1 tab over from our div, and that will help to keep our code organized. You'll notice that we also have some more line wrapping going on here, but that's perfectly fine. That doesn't affect the functionality of the code. Now, we will probably have many divs on the page, so we need to identify this div more specifically according to its function. So inside of our opening div tag right here, I'm going to type a space, and then I'm going to add an attribute called ID to identify it. And I'm going to name this ID wrapper. And I can go ahead and name this whatever I want, just like I can type anything into an alt attribute or anything into a source or href attribute. So I've called this div wrapper. And an ID attribute will uniquely identify elements on the page. So now if we save this and switch over to our CSS, we can go ahead and type a hash or a pound symbol followed by the name of the ID. So we've called it wrapper. And then we can go ahead and open up our curly braces, and that's going to select that div that we just created.